Hi there, this is Jennifer from Rotate Watches. This video tutorial is for our flagship 3 kits that utilize the ETA 6497-1 movement. So you're most likely watching this video because you purchased one of our kits or you're interested in learning more about watchmaking. So hopefully this video can give you a better idea of what watchmaking entails and how to build your first watch. Before we get started, we wanted to ensure that you keep a few things in mind. So number 1, make sure to always wear gloves at all times during this process, because no matter what you're touching, like if it's the movement or handling that, you don't want to get oil on the movement or anything that could disrupt the functionality of the pieces. Number 2, be sure to always handle all of the pieces with care. It is a watch, which is a fragile instrument, so you don't want to be rattling things around or setting things down super heavily. You want to make sure that you have a gentle hand when dealing with all of the pieces. And number 3, watchmaking is a challenging process, so remember to be patient and take your time. If you struggle with any step of the process, just take a deep breath and consider revisiting it at another time. Most importantly, don't forget to enjoy the watchmaking process. Take the time to learn about each piece and each step of the process in building your watch. If you have any struggles along the way, we're here to help. Just send us a message at hello@rotatewatches.com. This is all the parts and tools in our kit laid out. First off, we have the movement, which is an ETA 6497-1 style movement. It has 17 joules and it's fully mechanical and hand wound. That means that it relies on hand winding and on kinetic energy to power. And next up we have the case. So the case will come in 4 different pieces: the case back, case middle, and the case front, as well as the crown, which will detach from the case. The case is made out of sapphire glass and stainless steel and is waterproof up to 5 ATM. Then we have our watch dial, otherwise known as the watch face, and the watch straps, which is made out of genuine leather. And then we have a small plastic container that includes all the small pieces needed to build the watch, which includes gears, tabs, screws, a washer, and the watch hands. And then on the tool side of the kit, we have many specialized watchmaking tools, which include a precision screwdriver, a spring bar tool for the straps, and a set of tweezers, as well as a set of cutters, which will be used to cut the stem from the movement, and a small vial of super glue for adhering the crown to the movement. And then we've also included a pair of nitrile gloves for you to work with. So the first step is to prep the movement. So you want to remove it from the plastic casing that it comes in. And then it'll also come with a spare pair of hands, just a minute in the seconds hand, which is used by our team to just quality check before we send it out, ensure that the movement is working properly. The first step of the process is to remove the default hands that the movement comes with. To remove these, you just want to take your tweezers and grab the hand near the base and just lift directly upwards. There might be a little bit of pull, but if you just pull them up, they should just come cleanly off. None of the gears in the movement should come off along with it. It should just be a flat hand that comes off of the movement. And the second step is to take out the stem. So we want to flip the movement over, and just by the set stem, you'll see a small screw there. So we just want to gently loosen it up. Only loosen it about 270 degrees. And then you want to gently tug on the stem to see if it'll come out. And if it doesn't come out, loosen it about 90 degrees more, just a little bit, and eventually the stem will just come right out. During this step, you want to be really careful not to over loosen the screw, because other pieces on the other side could fall out of this if the screw is too loose. So that came off, and just to demonstrate on this side, there's a few pieces here that could come out if you over loosen the screw, which would be like this gear or the other pieces around the movement. So you want to make sure that you do it carefully so that they're still intact there. And then the next step would be to case the movement. What you're going to do is you're going to take the movement, line it up with the case, and you'll drop it in, keeping in mind that the stem will need to match up with the movement. The movement only goes in through one side of the case, so you'll drop it in from above. The next step would be to cut off the crown that came with the movement, just because it's not a very pretty looking crown. And then we'll attach the stem to the crown that was included in the kit. To cut it off, you're going to be using your cutter tool. We would recommend cutting off maybe a third of it to start out with. So I'm just going to cut off a third of the stem. And you do this by and you do this by pinching it in the scissor part of the cutter, like way up there, and then just squeeze it and the tip should come right off. And then you're gonna take the crown and you'll screw the crown right onto the stem. And then stick it in and see about how much is left. So here we can see that there's definitely like a few millimeters left because this crown should end up just tucking right over the case. So we'll go ahead, remove the crown again, cut off a few more millimeters from the stem. We're basically just going to repeat this until the crown fits onto the stem perfectly. And then some tips with these steps: when you cut the crown, always be careful to just cut a millimeter or so every time you do it, just because you can always cut more off the stem, but you obviously can't add more length to the stem. Now that we've got the crown in a good position, we want to add a little bit of super glue to the end just to make sure that the crown stays in place in this position. To do this, we'll open our super glue, put some glue on there, and then we'll re-screw the crown back on over that. And then reinsert it into the movement. And now we want to retighten the screw that we unscrewed earlier on. So go back and tighten the screw up. And of course, during all these steps, be careful not to touch anything in the movement that you don't need to touch, like never touch the balance spring. That could affect the accuracy of the movement in the end product. And then we'll turn the movement back around. And just to do a quality check, the stem should move in two different positions. So the innermost position will wind the movement and will be what gives the movement the power to run. And then if you pull the movement out slightly, it should pop into a second position, which is what will turn the hands and adjust the time. Also, if you do make a mistake with the glue, this is cyanoacrylic glue, which is easily undone by acetone, otherwise known as nail polish remover. If you need to undo the glue, just soak it in acetone and it should come undone within half an hour or so. For the next step of the process, this is one of the most challenging steps of the process, so be sure to be careful with this step. We're going to be applying movement tabs and screws to hold the movement down to the case. So for this, you're going to open your small plastic container and we'll just take out the tabs. So there's going to be 2 tabs and 2 screws. There it is. 2 tabs and 2 screws for this. We're going to be putting these tabs and screws into these 2 holes in the movement. So this will essentially hold down the movement to the case, making sure that it doesn't rattle when you move your watch around. The most straightforward way to explain it is you want to get the tab in place over that hole, and then you want to screw the screw in, holding it down. And this can be challenging because the pieces are so small. So what I just did here was put the tab down, and then I grabbed the screw around the head of the screw and held it in place while I pushed down with a screwdriver, like after it found its hole. And now that it's in place, I can just screw it down all the way until as far as I can. One trick that you could use is using putty to do this, or at least to hold the tab in place. So for instance, I have here some Rotico watchmaking putty, which is commonly used by watchmakers for a variety of purposes during the watchmaking process. So one way we can use this is by shaping it into a little point. And then you can then use this point to hold down the tab while you get the screw in there and screw that around. Or you can have the tab already there and use this to put the screw down and get its place in the hole. So that's one trick. We have a much more extensive guide online. So if you want more details or other tips and tricks that you could try to get the step done, view our site online at rotatewatches.com/easyguide. A little challenging at first. The next step, we're gonna flip the movement over, and then we're gonna start working on the top of the watch. So the first step is to place down the center gear over the middle, and this should connect with all the other gears in the gear train. And then you want to put a washer on top of it, which will help with putting the dial on top of it. And then the next step is to set the dial down onto the movement. And the dial has dial feet on the bottom, which will connect with the movement, making sure that it doesn't wriggle around. So it should just go right on like that. And then we're going to start putting the hands on. So the first hand we could do is the hour hand. So we're just going to position the hand over the hole, and I like to use a finger and just gently push it downward. It should perch right on there. Next, you want to put the minute hand on over that. And when you do this, you want to make sure that the hands are at an angle that would make sense. One trick that I like using with this is by just taking the tweezers and just leaving a few millimeters in between them and pushing down on the hand from both sides to make sure that it goes over completely so that it's a good fit. Now that we have the minute and hour hand on, we want to move on to the seconds hand. So for the seconds hand, you just want to set it on top of the needle that's in the seconds hand hole. And I recently wound this movement, so I know that it's working and that it's on the hole because it's ticking right now. For all the hands, we want to just make sure that they're all parallel to the face of the watch, just to ensure that they don't bump into each other at any point while they're ticking, and that they'll point to the time accurately. And so we're coming up on the last steps of the process, so now we want to close the case. So we want to start with the case front here. The normal method of closing it is to, first of all, ensure that the waterproofing ring is in the case, which is this little black ring that you can see along the ring of the case, and which is what will make it waterproof up to 5 ATM. And then, knowing that it's in place, we'll set it down on top of the case. And this is a push front case, so it will just require some pressure to push the case on. For this, it will require more effort than you probably think it will, just because it needs that much to ensure that it's waterproof. Once we make sure that the waterproofing ring is set, I'll place it over on top of the watch, and then in my case, I like to stand up just so I have a little more leverage when I'm pushing the case in, and then using the blunt in my hand, I'll place it on the case, and then I'll just push it in. This should close the case nicely, especially because the blunt of your hand, there's meat there, so it's not going to shatter the case or anything. There's a few more tricks that are outlined in our online manual, rotatewatches.com/easy guide. One other tactic is using a case press, which is what most watch repair shops and watchmakers tend to use. So this is our watch press, which is available on our shop. A watch press is essentially used to make closing the case an easier process. It'll come with the dies separately. So what you want to do when you have a case press is to measure the die. Not just for our watch, but for any watch. You want to make sure that the die outlines the watch case. So you don't want the die to be pressing on the glass itself. You want it to be pressing on the perimeter just so you don't shatter the case. So for this, now that we've measured out the appropriate dies, we'll screw them on to the top and bottom. If you're using a case press, you want to first attach the case back. So in order to close the case back, it's a twist back case. So you want to make sure that the waterproofing ring is aligned, and then so you want to turn the case back clockwise until it has some resistance, and you'll know that the case is closed. Now that the case back is on, we can align the case front to the top of the case and then put it into the case press and gently squeeze just to align everything, make sure that nothing is sticking out from the case. And then, just for me to get a little more leverage, I like to stand during this as well. And I'll just gently squeeze, and it might take a few tries, and then it should just squeeze right into place. And now it's a secure case. And then if you do get a case press from our site, it also comes with a case knife. So if you ever do want to open the watch case, for instance, to switch out the dial or anything, you would just use a dull knife, or in this case, a case knife. Stick it into the edge between the case front and the case middle, and you'll just wedge it open until it pops right off. And the final step is to put the straps onto the watch. So for this, the watch straps that come with our kits are easy release watch straps. There's a little tab on the straps. You just want to push this down, and the bar will retreat a bit, enough for you to get it on. So for this, we'll put the strap into the hole and then push the tab down and release when the other half is securely in the case. And then we'll do the same with the other one as well. And if you do have straps that aren't easy release, you can use the SPRINGBAR tool for this. So using the bigger end of the SPRINGBAR tool, you would just align it to the end of the SPRINGBAR, push it down, and then push it into place. And this is the completed watch. Congrats! So we'll do one final check just to make sure that everything in the watch is working properly. So as we checked before, it should move into 2 different positions, one of them winding the watch, and then when you pop it out, it should move the hands of the watch. And just to double check, you want to turn it around and make sure that the balance wheel is moving, that the seconds hand is moving, and then keep in mind that these are fully mechanical watches. So in order for it to continue ticking and keeping accurate time, it relies on both the winding and on kinetic energy, which can be achieved by natural hand movement. So if you just wear the watch on a daily basis, your day-to-day actions should be enough to power the watch with kinetic movement. For our full guide, including some more FAQ, troubleshooting, and additional tips, visit our online guide at rotatewatches.com/easyguide. Alright, so I hope that you were able to successfully build a watch for me and you were able to learn more about watchmaking during this video. For more information or to view our full selection of watch kits, visit our site at rotatewatches.com, and make sure to follow our Instagram and Twitter at rotatewatches, and on Facebook at facebook.com/rotatewatches. Thank you for taking the time to make time with me today.